Good morning, Sazam. So we're nearly there. It's nearly the end of term, and the holiday that comes up is the biggest holiday there is in the school year. And do you want to know why there's a big holiday in the summer? Well, it starts in England from the very first schools, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And the children would be needed at a certain time of the year, and they would be needed to harvest all the stuff in the land. So they'd have August and September off because they'd be so busy harvesting, they wouldn't have time for books or anything like that because they were needed in the fields to gather in the harvest. And that's why still, believe it or not, we have a summer holiday. Now, I'm not especially expecting that any of you are going to be needed during your holiday to work in the fields. So what is the point of having a holiday? Why don't we just, have school all year round, because it's important to learn. And I think we don't, because there's something important about the idea of resting. And resting is so important that it is fixed into the very first story of the creation of the world in the Bible. And if you don't know this story, it's at the very beginning of the Bible. And the first thing is to say, I wouldn't take it like literally, because it can't be literal, because it talks about days, and you don't start having days until the very beginning of this story. But what it says is that God created the heavens and the earth, and then he divides off the earth from the land, and he puts the stars and the moon in the sky, and he creates the seas and the land, and there are fish that go in the sea, and there are creatures that go on the land. And he creates humans to populate the land and to look after the earth. And then it says, well, that took him 6 days. It says on the seventh day, he saw that it was all good, and he rested. I don't think that's because God, who is all-powerful, actually needs a rest. I think it's because the humans need an example of someone having a rest. Because sometimes, believe it or not, humans can get pretty frantic, and we keep working, we can keep working, and we can keep working. But there comes a point when we're not working very well because we're not rested. And that's why I think holidays are really important. They're times to kind of rest your brain. So it's quite good that the next Monday morning you won't be having to get your school uniform on and make sure you've left the house by a certain time. You could just be in bed a little bit longer and you can rest. And that's really important for teachers as well as students, that sometimes you have times when you can just rest. When the Hebrew scriptures got written in the very first times, it wasn't a guarantee that you ever got a rest, especially if you were a slave. If you were a slave like the Israelites were in Egypt, the Egyptians would just make you work every single day. There'd be no way to stop. And so it was really important that there was a preserved time for rest. And I think that's why they put in the story of God creating the world that for 6 days he did work, and it was important to work, but the seventh day he rested. So for the next, 36, 48 hours while you're at school, please do continue to work, but then be ready to rest. And I hope the 5 or 6 weeks, 7 weeks you have off in between now and starting term again, you will feel rested, because so many people have had to work so hard to keep the school going through the pandemic. And I'm sure there are a lot of exhausted people out there. Children, you'll be exhausted. Adults, you'll be pretty exhausted too. God blessed rest. He thought it was really important, and it is still really, really important. So I pray that we can continue resting now.